From 2019 until 2024, there have been 6 unique NBA champions. This streak of 6 different champions is the first time it's happened since the 1970s, tying a long-lasting record from that era, with a chance to be broken in 2025 as well. How did we get to this point? Well, it all started with Adam Silver and his ambitions to create a league where more teams have an equal, or maybe not equal, but a better shot at winning a championship in a more leveled playing field. Quote, "There was no question that there's a correlation between spending and the quality of the team, and that while I understand that dynasties are something that fans will get behind, at the same time, what you hear from fans is they want those teams to be created the right way. So people aren't that interested in seeing teams buy championships, so to speak." In this video, we're going to take a look at how the NBA was able to accomplish their goal of creating an environment where there's so much parity across the sport, with a plethora of different teams having a legit shot to win the championship. And along with it came a drastic reduction in super teams and dynasties in the modern era. Is it good that 2 of the greatest superstars of our generation are stuck with a supporting cast that's just not as good as it could be? On the other hand, what kind of teams flourish under the NBA's new push towards parity? Have you guys thought about a gift to get your dad for Father's Day next month? Well, ever since I started my journey on YouTube, my dad has been the most supportive person in my life. He always watches my videos, he always shares it with his friends. This Father's Day, let's treat our dads with something nice, introducing Raycon's Everyday Earbuds. They're the perfect gift for your dad, and he can use it in basically any situation that calls for it. Working out at the gym, conference calls for work, listening to music, doing yard work or chores around the house. With Raycon's Everyday Earbuds, he'll be equipped with premium audio, a weatherproof and sweat-resistant design, and a 32-hour battery life. Raycon's quick charge function lets you charge for only 10 minutes to get 90 minutes of battery. It also comes with their amazing active noise cancellation feature, which is difficult to find at such an accessible, dad-friendly price point. Plus, a bonus on top, their protective case cover can wirelessly charge your earbuds, so you can charge them on the go. Honestly, I love my Raycons, especially with how comfortable they fit in my ears, which are quite big. Of course, I got my big ears from my dad, so I'm sure he'll find them super comfortable too. Plus, if you purchase them using my link, you'll be supporting me as well. Go to buyraycon.com/hoops to get 15% off site-wide. Brought to you by Raycon. First things first, let's try to answer this question. Is it good for the sport? Let's take a look at one aspect of this question: viewership. Adam Silver's goal to create parity is quite simple, yet during this same era of having many different champions and no dynasties, the viewership of the NBA, in particular the playoffs and finals, have decreased emphatically. Perhaps you could claim, oh, it's because it's the Steph Curry effect. Without him in the finals, people aren't as excited to watch. But what about the 2022 finals, where the Warriors faced the Boston Celtics, one of the most popular teams across the nation, and yet they still managed a viewership level nowhere close to the old Cavs-Warriors rivalry? Of course, as mentioned in my Blackouts video, the decreased viewership in the NBA is unique in the basketball world. As the NCAA and the EuroLeague basketball, they've both gotten more popular in the same time period. That's because there's plenty of factors that contribute to the NBA's lowered viewership, mainly stuff like blackouts, illegal streams, and a style of play that might not be suited to everyone's liking. Even though, in my opinion, it's the most exciting era for basketball in my entire lifetime. I mean, if you just watched basketball in the 2000s, it was a grind fest night after night. The games were so slow, and people used to praise how good the defense was back then, but those same people never talk about how bad the offenses looked. Regardless, over the years, well, scratch that, over the decades, the NBA has implemented several obstacles that make it difficult to create a stacked roster by just throwing money at players. The first obstacle was obviously the salary cap, implemented in 1984. This set a limit to how much money a team can pay their players, implemented right in the midst of the Lakers-Celtics dynasty. As instrumental as the 1980s were for reviving basketball, there were plenty of complaints from owners around the league who simply could not compete with the sheer amount of money the Lakers and Celtics could throw around. And thus, the salary cap was the first step to ensure a more balanced playing field, a way to give every team an opportunity to win the title.
It's over.
Second, the luxury tax. The luxury tax was implemented in 1999. With a soft cap in place, the luxury tax penalized teams who were spending too much, and it made it harder for teams to keep everyone on their roster if they all want to get paid. Third, the first apron. A more severe luxury tax was created in the 2011 lockout, called the first apron, which penalized teams even further by going past the cap. At this point, the richest owners of the most expensive franchises all believed it couldn't get worse from here, right? This was the last thing the NBA would do to limit super teams and instant dynasties popping up left and right. Except it wasn't. Fourth, the second apron. Introduced as part of the 2023 collective bargaining agreement as an additional tax burden, one which is so severe and crippling that not even the NBA's richest owners would dare cross. Actually, as of the 2024-25 season, only 3 teams in the entire league has surpassed the second apron: the Suns, the Wolves, and the Celtics. The Wolves and Celtics are in the right position to be pushing through, and the Suns? Well, let's not talk about that. Every other team, even contenders and super rich owners, try to avoid it because they don't want to pay an exorbitant amount of tax. Here lies the problem. The second apron is the problem. Despite being introduced in 2023, owners around the league have heard rumblings of it happening a few years prior to that, so they've made preparations to make sure their team avoids crossing the apron at all costs. The 2022 Warriors, the last year before the second apron became a surefire addition to the NBA, that team spent a total of $346 million in payroll and luxury taxes that year. Some say the 2023 CBA was a direct response to the Warriors' ridiculous spending habits, which left other teams in the dust.
And a chance at 4 for Stephen Curry.
But the bigger problem lies in the fact that it's so hard for teams to now keep their players, their same core of players for a long period of time, even the players they drafted themselves. Gone are the days of the Steph, Clay, and Dre dynasties built from scratch, because in the modern NBA, there's no way to keep a trio of stars intact and still surround them with quality role players, unless, some of them are severely underpaid. Like Steph Curry when he was getting paid only $11 million per year during those dynasty years. Take the 2022-23 Nuggets as an example. On paper, their story to the championship is an inspiration, a true revelation of a team building their roster with draft picks, developing their homegrown talent to reach the upper echelon of NBA prosperity. In fact, when they won that championship, there was a stark similarity in the Warriors' first championship back in 2015. You had a 27, 28-year-old superstar in the middle of his prime. You had 2 other guys, 2 other core players, all of whom were drafted and developed by their respective teams. Then you had a major player you acquired from a mid-season trade a few years prior. For the Nuggets, it was Aaron Gordon. For the Warriors, Andrew Bogut, both of whom provided a level of toughness and defense, the intangibles, and were willing to accept their role to do all the little things necessary to help their teams win. Of course, these 2 teams played in completely different ways, as the Nuggets were the NBA's most dominant team in the paint, while the Warriors were the most dominant from range. But the concept of how they built their teams were similar, and that's why many folks also believe the Nuggets were on their way to establishing a dynasty for years to come, and be on top of the conference for years to come. Unfortunately, the impending blockade of the second apron became a real burden to navigate. During an interview, Josh Kroenke, the son of Stan Kroenke, the owner of the Denver Nuggets and the 4th richest NBA owner, was asked about his thoughts on spending over the second apron threshold. To which Josh Kroenke responded, Quote, I think one important footnote about this group that we have is that the core of this team was assembled under a different CBA. We drafted, we developed, and we built this team under a different set of rules. Those rules have changed on the fly. There are obviously different conversations that come along with that going forward when you start talking about separate penalties that we're talking about, but we're going to be aggressive. Have they actually been aggressive? Not necessarily. In fact, they've actively avoided going above the second apron by any means possible. For example, when the Nuggets let Kentavious Caldwell-Pope walk in free agency, they had no choice. If the Kroenke family wanted to stay under the second apron, they needed to let him go. They couldn't pay him. So it's not like the Nuggets GM, or former GM, Calvin Booth, he didn't have a choice. While KCP underperformed in Orlando, I feel like he wouldn't have dropped off nearly as much if he stayed in Denver, just cause he gets so many open looks in the Nuggets offense. More importantly, it gives the Nuggets more depth. If KCP stayed in the starting lineup, it allows Christian Braun to come off the bench and basically make their bench way better. And vice versa, if KCP came off the bench, he'd give them the boost in shooting that they desperately need. The 2024-25 Denver Nuggets had one of the worst benches in the entire league. In terms of scoring and net rating, they were a whopping -626 across the entire season. Now, this devastating weakness in their roster is quite well known. The Nuggets do not and have not had a good bench for several years now. The issue is, it's near impossible for them to fix this. With the owner's unwillingness to go past the second apron, the only thing they can do is keep drafting. Keep trying to develop young players who are on cheap contracts and hope they won't be a liability when it's time for the playoffs. Either that, or they can hope to sign veterans to cheap minimum contracts, like Russell Westbrook. Even if an all-star was available in free agency, there's no way they could get him. This has created an environment in Denver where even as Jokic somehow gets even better, the team around him has regressed, with no solution available. One could point the blame to Murray and Porter's contracts, both of whom are severely overpaid for their production. But in this current era, it's also extremely difficult to trade large, overvalued contracts unless a team is stupid enough to take them on. The Denver Nuggets are one example of how the current rules of enforcing parity on the league has been a detriment. Yes, some mistakes were made on their own, but the fact that it has bottlenecked the team from improving any further, it prevents them from becoming the dynasty that could have happened.
That's it. The Timberwolves have knocked out the defending champion Denver Nuggets.
It's not so much different than the Milwaukee Bucks. With Giannis, who's been hard carrying the whole city of Milwaukee on his back, yet there's no support. Nobody to get him the help he needs to contend for the title. Though the Bucks' situation is quite different. Injuries have hindered their progress, along with an aging roster. Plus, I'd say they were even more crippled by bad front office decisions. The question is this good for the NBA? Is it good that two of the greatest stars of the modern generation are both stuck in an impossible situation where their teams can't do anything to help them? Had the second apron not been implemented, it's very likely the Nuggets, who have the fourth richest owner in the league, and the Bucks, with the sixth richest owner, could have stacked their rosters to the very brim, with great supporting players down the board and meet in the finals year after year. Kinda like, the Magic and Bird of the modern generation. They're obviously willing to pay a huge sum in luxury taxes if it was still just the first apron, as they have done so in the past. But the burden from the second is just too much for them to consider. In reality, I don't think this was the goal that Adam Silver intended when he negotiated this new apron into NBA law. He wanted to prevent super teams like the Brooklyn Nets from forming, where Nets owner Joe Tsai basically dropped a ton of money just to make this team. Instead, however, Silver made it so difficult for teams to keep their core intact. Now, who benefits from a rule like this? Which teams thrive under this new NBA landscape? Well, the new rules have created a level of parity unseen in the history of the league, but in a way that benefits young teams much more than teams in their prime. What do I mean by this? Well, young players, when they first come into the league, they're typically signed to much cheaper contracts that span at least 3 or 4 years. So if they are able to develop quickly during their first few years in the league, their team benefits greatly. They essentially generate an immense amount of value due to their low salary and high production, and this is probably the highest value they'll ever generate in their career. That's kinda why, in this modern day and age, it seems like some teams come out of nowhere and surpass some more established teams.
Halliburton, 5 seconds, 4 seconds. Halliburton for the lead. 1.3 to go. Harry Trent Jr. lets it fly. And the Pacers are moving on. What a comeback in overtime.
For example, take a look at this. The Oklahoma City Thunder, the #1 seed in the West with a ridiculous 68 wins, have a payroll of just $167 million, the 6th lowest in the entire league. The Houston Rockets, the 2nd seed, are at $171 million. The Indiana Pacers, who are already a better team than the Bucks, are only at $169 million. Orlando, and especially Detroit, both young playoff teams, have a payroll way below anyone else in the league. While the common thought process is, oh man, imagine what happens when all these young teams reach their primes. They're for sure gonna be contenders for years to come. In reality, however, when the players do start approaching their primes, their teams won't have enough cap space to keep all of them. With the second apron looming in the background, their actual window to contend for the title is now and in the next few years. It's a very short window when their young players are producing at a level far beyond their salary. As they get older, they'll for sure demand a much higher payday. And even if they continue to get better, their production per dollar will be a lot worse. Production per dollar. This is a stat that I believe the NBA should start tracking. We're all aware of the traditional box score stats, and even most advanced stats can tell you how much of a positive or negative impact a player has on the court. But what about how much value he provides in relation to how much they get paid? For example, Bradley Beal is not worth $50 million per year, obviously. And that's what makes him a negative asset, and that's why everyone clowns him for underperforming. But if he were being paid like $5 or $10 million, he'll be one of the NBA's most valuable players from a salary perspective. In the future, NBA teams will likely move towards this trend. Instead of throwing $50 million per year at Jamal Murray or Bradley Beal, analytics will start calculating the best way to optimize their roster. During an era where the luxury tax burden is as strict as ever, this is what will separate great teams from elite teams. Teams that could compete for the championship versus teams that are stuck in the same spot for years. That's all, folks. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Are you a fan of this newfound parity in the NBA? I for sure think the last couple playoffs were by far the most exciting to watch. Personally, I love it. I love going into the playoffs and just being so excited, not knowing which team will come out on top. Because the playing field, while there's still obviously teams that are better than other teams, there's no true favorite to win the championship anymore. As teams get adjusted to the new salary cap and luxury tax rules, I think we'll see the philosophy in team building change in the future, and dynasties will be much less common. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope y'all enjoyed the video, and of course, as always, I'll see you next time. Peace.